Happy New Year. This is a Weekly Jargon, and I am Jose Rodriguez.
Rohi Zachariah.
And today, Rohi, we are going to talk about the latest news on that open carry that was they created that ban on the open carry from California. There was a three-judge panel that overturned that, and I think that's created some stir and controversy.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll dive into it. But before we do, we just wanted to say Happy New Year. We're always grateful to go another year, Rohi, at the Weekly Jargon. I think we've been at this at least 2 years, and we try to provide content every week. But again, anything you want to add to the new year?
No, like we talked about last week, I'm glad for a new year, new exciting stuff. Hopefully, bringing new material for everyone, and hopefully you got your New Year's resolution, and you're still taking to it day 7 into it. So
yeah, for sure. So as you can see, this is the image that I have up. Again, these are images that are primarily, they may be copyrighted, but they're not being sold or distributed in any other way other than showing them and putting them out there so you can kind of gain a perspective of what we're going to talk about. And then you can see the urban open carry, so to speak, right? But anyhow, Rohi, let's dive into this. So give us some background on what's taking place, because this just happened January 2nd, soon after the new year.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's created some stir around the gun community.
So so this is your federal courts, your 9th district, and what is always difficult is that these decisions are always made on a Friday, and it's Friday afternoon, and it's so. If you know anything about government and Friday, there's no one to call. There's no answers to be gotten. It's just, here's the headlines. It's it's unconstitutional, and then we're all left in the dark to say, so what does that mean? And who do I call and what do I find out? And so this is what happened. We started getting the phone calls and the text messages and people saying, can we hit the streets, and when are we going, and what are we going to do next to exercise our fundamental rights, and pumping the brakes on everybody to understand that, well, wait a minute, we don't have guidance yet, and I think that's when all these things always happen. It's understanding that even though something is deemed unconstitutional, the current law that is in place, there's still a law, and that law will eventually get rewritten. It'll get, done in a way that now guides you, okay, this is what you can now do under the understanding of this unconstitutionality part of it. So maybe you can carry, but there's going to be dictation on where and how and all this, that if it doesn't get appealed or put a stay on, that we're kind of waiting for.
So just to give some context of what took place, right, on January 2nd, a 3-judge panel from the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals, and this is a federal court of appeals, right, ruled a 2-1 that California's prohibition on openly carrying firearms in counties with more than 200,000 residents is unconstitutional. So I think that's important to highlight because, again, counties that have over 200,000 in population, obviously Madera is not one of those. But our counties to the south, Fresno County, certainly meets that requirement there.
Yeah.
And now, from my understanding, is that now they have a permit, so to speak, under their constitutional right that they can do an open carry.
Potentially, and so a lot of this, when it came about, there were things like I wasn't even aware of that, like. For instance, in California up until 2012, we had open carry, but it was very restrictive to handguns that are unloaded. And why that is particular is, again, it's showing people and giving them guidance to say, look, even when we had open carry in California, it was very restricted still. There were still a law governing the who and the where and the what about this open carry. So it's, with that mentality, it's understanding like, okay, Fresno, you may potentially have the green light. And if you were to be arrested today, there's still an unknown of whether or not you would be suing the city or the county or whoever or the state for a violation of that constitutional right. Because, again, we don't know what it is. we just know it's unconstitutional at this point. And,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, and I think the areas, again, based on the headlines there, the impacted areas are the ban previously applied to major urban centers where
Yeah.
approximately 95% of California's population lives. So the court found that such a broad restriction violates the Second Amendment. The permit status, while general ban for urban areas was struck down, the court upheld the state's licensing requirements for open carry in rural counties populations under 200,000. So I believe there's still a process that you'd have to go through your county sheriff to get that open carry. Now, we're not promoting that you go out and start open carrying, right?
No,
That's not
no,
what
not
we're
at all.
saying. We're just kind of regurgitating what we've heard so far and
Yeah.
having a discussion, because for us, it's mainly opinion based, right? We're not experts, we're not attorneys, and we're certainly not providing any legal advice on what you can do.
Yeah.
This is what we received so far. And yesterday, I believe I saw an interview with one of the county supervisors and the county sheriff, I believe, for Fresno. And they were talking about, because Fresno's affected, right? So they were talking about this specific ban, and I could hear the sheriff stating that at this time, don't
Yep.
make any irrational decisions, right? You
Yeah.
still want to be able to be law-abiding
Yep.
people and follow some of the laws that we have until this kind of plays out within the next 21 days. And
Yeah.
and I think that if there was any advice or recommendation, is that you follow the advice of that
Yeah.
figure. Right now,
Yeah.
again, in the comment sections, I did hear, well, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's unconstitutional, right? And
Yeah.
there's just going to be those constitutionalists that are going to take that to a different level. And yeah, you may be right, because you have that right. I'm not going to infringe on that right and
Yeah.
tell you that you can't do that. And this is not the show to do that. We're just simply providing some context
Well-
to stir up some discussion.
And I think similar to the fraud issues going right now with these daycare centers and Democrats being put into a certain
Why you got to
position.
switch it over?
I know. But I think this is going to be that difficult thing for them as well, because the unconstitutionality, this open ban came about because of the expression from the Black Panthers group that was open and carrying during their time. And it's going to be a recognition of now potentially a racial issue, because why did we make a ban specifically because of this exercised activity when it was legal during that time? So Democrats are going to have to recognize, well, wait a minute, we banned because of a protected group now. And do we want to stand behind that group now and say, hey, you know what, we made a mistake. We shouldn't have banned this particular group from being able to do their rights, but opening the door to giving it to everybody else, And I don't know, I know that's kind of a weird roundabout way, but it's the Bruin decision and where all of this is always happening is because of the historical aspect has to come into play. So when they're looking at why was it unconstitutional, prior to this ban, it was constitutional. People were doing it prior to, the 60s. It was a recognized okay thing to do. And then all of a sudden, in a more recent time, is when we decided to ban it. That's why it's getting all removed, is because the historical aspect is what's kicking in and saying, wait a minute, this never existed until this time period, and therefore you cannot do that. You cannot ban it. It's a protected right. So they're going to have to recognize that and say, well, wait a minute, why did we ban it? Oh, it's because we banned it because of this particular group. It was too scary. We didn't want them to do that, and it's going to reverse course. So.
Yeah, and I think it's important to bring that historical context, because during the civil rights era, and you mentioned the Black Panthers, but that's exactly what they were doing, right? They were actually looking after their communities, but they were doing it in a open carry that seemed intimidating to a lot of folks that were probably not Black, right? I mean, I think that's probably what stirred up the ban in the first place, is that now you have this group of people overseeing their community, but they're doing it in an open carry, and people would say militant style, right? But I mean, at the end of the day, I think they were just trying to express their constitutional right. And if that was the case, Rohi, and again, we're not attorneys to provide legal advice, but if that was the case, it certainly makes you think about why that ban was there in the first place,
So
right?
yeah, so I mean, I got the picture here if you want to gonna
Yeah, let's go ahead and
show
do
that
that.
display. So this is the picture that I think most people right now in question are thinking we should go back to, but this is the image at the time, and it says 1967, where they were expressing their constitutional right. They were open carrying. Obviously, you got a guy, here wearing a bandolier, and it was okay. They couldn't do anything about it. And obviously, at this point, they're at the Capitol. So I mean, now you're on government property with guns, giving somewhat of a display to of power, and right away, that's when they decided, no, we got to make a law. We got to prohibit this. We can't have that. So it's asking ourselves, I guess, at the end of the day, where are we going to redraw the line? Because if we go back to prior to 67, then this is going to be what is allowed. I should be able to have a gun in my hand walking down the street, and you can't do anything about it. And I can do it as a group. Not only that, not just me as an individual, but rifles, handguns, whatever I want, I'm going to be able to go down the street. I won't say it's the danger, but that's kind of where, when things get ruled unconstitutional, we start unrolling things. It's how far do we want to unroll them? Do we want to go back to 2012 and say, well, it just meant an unloaded handgun on your hip in a holster, you can't touch it, you pull it out of that holster, it's potential crime?
Yeah.
Or do we want to say, like, nope, you can just, whatever you want, you just have a gun, you just walk around. I want to go walk into Walmart and have a rifle in my hand, perfectly fine.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think when you look at it though, Rohi, in our society today,
Yeah.
and how we see and perceive things of a more modernized society, do we need to go to that extent to where you now want to carry with the holster or walk into a store with the firearm? I mean, not knowing that person's mental health condition, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is not to say, would Americans feel more safe, or the opposite would take place, where, well, because it's so common now to carry, you get used to it. I'm sure there's certain countries where that happens, but nevertheless, there's an aspect of fear or something that can go off or spark when you have a gun out in the open, right?
Yeah.
And then you walk into a grocery store, you walk into a restaurant, for example. Your family, you start thinking of your family and the risk. I think those things do come into play. I don't know that Californians would be ready for that. Again,
Why is it always California?
Well,
Why are we
well,
broken? Because the rest of the country does this.
well,
and it's
right now,
okay,
this is
so.
the topic right now. The
Yeah.
topic is California.
Yeah.
Is it common? Maybe in Texas, can you do an open
Yeah,
carry?
the
Can you walk around?
There's a lot of
and-
states that have open carry
Yeah.
with restrictions, and
Yes.
that's the thing again to go back to is, like, for instance, like Florida.
So when you say
Open carry,
restriction,
there's still restrictions
Yeah.
to the how and the where and the what.
but
so.
see now when you add restrictions, then you're not allowing the right of that
Well-
constitutional right, which is the right to bear arms, right? So
No, so
with the
yeah.
restriction comes a license and or a permit that again
Well,
restrains you from really exercising that right.
So and that's that's the part to understand when you look at constitutionality. So the big change we had, for instance, in California, and turning ourselves into a may issue or a shall issue state, which meant that a county has to issue a permit, a CCW permit. Where prior to the court's decision, they didn't have to do that. I could be like San Francisco and say, we don't give permits. There was a court ruling that said, and this had to do with Hawaii, that said you have to give the public the option of either or open carry or concealed carry or both. That was a federal ruling because Hawaii had neither. They don't allow anything, no carry, no nothing. With that ruling that said you have to give the people a constitutional right to either open carry or concealed carry, that's what came back to California to say, oh wait, oh crap, we can no longer deny the right to somebody to concealed carry or open carry. So it turned it into you have to give a permit. You have to give that CCW permit. So when you look at When we go back to now and say, okay, hey, look, California, you also have to give the option for open carry. It doesn't mean that there could not be a permit process. It doesn't mean that there couldn't be rules around how to get or where you can carry and how you can carry it, because as long as you give the option, as long as at the end of the day, California can say, look, hey, Jose, he can carry his rifle. It just has to be unloaded, no magazine in it. He has to have a permit. The permit costs $5,000. Like that would be in the eyes constitutional, because again, right now to carry your concealed carry, permit, where you can carry, how you can carry, you got to get training, you have to get all these aspects. You still at the end of the day have the ability to conceal carry. There's just the hoops to go through. So that's kind of where, when you say like, oh, it's unconstitutional, now I can carry. Well, wait a minute. The state still has that option to put restrictions on it.
So the state may make that policy, Rohi, but here's what I normally uncover, because it does require reinforcement of that policy and or permit, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
And enforcement of those policies have to have teeth in them, right? So that means people have to be making sure. Now, think about the population, for example, and it's hypothetical, right? So let's just say that 50% of a population would say, and I'm talking about maybe these urban areas that have over 200,000.
Yeah.
They say, well, you know what, I don't feel safe seeing people with open carry. And the other half would say, oh, I feel it's the great thing. You could imagine the level of service that needs to take place in order for people to feel safe. Because if you are a peace officer, or if you are someone within the public safety arena, you know, you're going to get calls, inundated with calls and saying, hey, there's a gentleman or there's someone or a woman with a open carry. I don't know if they're licensed, but someone needs to review. So now you have these checks and stops, and I think that could be very overwhelming. Again, this isn't me choosing or leaning on any particular side. I'm just thinking of the whole thing, because sometimes when policies are done, bans are created, we don't see the aftermath until it kind of unravels, and it takes years or months to see how that's going to be structured.
I can give you an idea where the argument with that will be is, and I don't know if you watched the First Amendment auditor people that go around California right now.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I remember when we first encountered them, it was I think right before COVID, I think. And I remember, you know, the stir and the commotion, and we had law enforcement come in because these guys came to the government center, and, you know, and you know, just ourselves and our encounter with them, and realizing like, wait a minute, whoa, we're going to get sued right now because they are doing something that is acceptable and constitutionally protected, right? But guess what? You fast forward today, they come in, they do their thing, we let them do their thing, nobody even cares because all of a sudden we're educated to what they can do. I believe that's going to be the unfortunate process is if tomorrow, you know, it comes out that, hey, you can open carry, you're going to have, I would love to see the flood of Second Amendment auditors open carrying, potentially getting arrested, having the police called out, and then the news getting a hold of it and finally educating people that, well, wait a minute, this is a protected constitutional right. Chill out, everyone. You know what I mean? And then I think that's going to have to be the process, because these First Amendment auditor guys, they still get pushed back, but if you watch their videos now, they get boring because it's kind of like, yeah, we know what you're doing, go do it, who cares? You know what I mean? Big deal. Everybody's upset because, you know, it's like it's pushing their buttons, and I think that's going to be the same thing. You're going to be like, man, I really don't like that guy walking down the street with a rifle, but he can.
Yeah.
So
and I think
whatever.
Whenever you have like these laws that take place, and let's say that this took place back during the civil rights era, maybe 1960s and 70s.
Yeah.
And over the years, you've had more and more laws that restrain you from really carrying a firearm. Then you get society, or in this case, Californians used to a certain way of living, right? You're now living without the fear. And again, I say fear because, you know, anytime people see someone with a gun or something, a holster, or even, you know, just a rifle, and walking down the street, I mean, to some extent, I think here in California, we would get alarmed. Hey, there's someone walking down the
Yeah.
street with a,
Yeah.
what it looks appears to be an assault rifle, and
Whatever that means.
yeah, right, and I'm concerned.
Typical Democrat
and
talk, but that's okay.
Yeah, and I'm concerned. Right? Well, I'm just giving you like these,
No, I know.
these
Yeah.
these very real possibilities that could take place, and
Yeah.
although we may poke at it, but nevertheless, people are going to feel threatened, fear, because again, you've passed all these laws to get people accustomed to live a certain way, and if you want to revert back to a certain time, yes, maybe that is the right constitutional thing to do, but what does that do to society that has been programmed to live a certain way?
Yeah.
I think for me, that would be the more psychological perspective of how people would see that, and how would they perceive these laws, and whether California is moving in some would call it a very progressive way, very advanced modern society way, or reverting back to a very like days where you can carry arms and it doesn't matter, right? And
Well, I think that for me, I think a lot of that can be looked at, or you can compare it to the whole legalization of marijuana, right? California legalizes marijuana. You would think that up until that legalization, all of a sudden, the fear is, oh my gosh, everybody's going to get high, and it's just going to be like in the streets, and we're just going to have this totally high society. And then it passes, and it's kind of like nobody even cares about it. Like, yeah, there was a period of, I'm sure, like the day it passed and the surge in people buying and all this kind of stuff. But then you look at the numbers, and it's kind of like the people who did it, and the people who don't. It didn't turn the society into this like, dependent society. And I think that's going to be the same thing. If you allow open carry, there will probably be a handful of people that's because that's just what they want to do. They're going to express their constitutional right. They're going to open carry. They're going to walk down the street. And then at some point, they're just going to get bored of it and stop, and it will be on the books as legal. And just like prior to the 67 issues, nobody does it. It'll just be there, until, there's some reason to do that. And that's where, again, I think, if California is going to fully allow it, there's going to be some guidance, just like we have in concealed carry, where they're going to be, you can't have a rally, you can't be at public events with them, you can't go into, these protected areas with them. There's going to have to be some kind of guidance, because I know California's just they're not going to just let it go. They're not going to just say, like, yep, you're right, we lost, open carry, do whatever you want. They're always going to come back with some kind of stipulation or guidance to give law enforcement that hand. Because again, like you're saying, is some guy's walking down the street, we don't know he's a felon, we don't know if he's okay to do that, we don't know if, there's that law is what allows them to open that door to say, hey, sir, can we just see your ID? Can we check the gun? Can we make sure everything is legal? That's where there's going to have to be that provision there. So,
yeah, no, and I think you and I have talked about this, especially with the concealed carry weapons, right? We talk about the education that goes behind that, and I feel that when you have a more informed and educated population, I think that doesn't really. I don't think that having that open carry would really be a problem, because some studies have shown that states that have open carry laws with certain permits and requirements see a decrease in gun violence, right?
Yeah.
And some may argue that, right? I mean, you're going to have different arguments depending on who's doing the study, right?
Sure.
But like in our case here, right, where concealed, I mean, I think that the training itself, Roy, and I say this, and I'll say this over and over, is it's so imperative in wanting to get yourself informed, because at the end of the day, you may think twice about saying, you know what, maybe I don't really want to have one, because based on what I'm hearing and the laws that are currently in California, it'd be very, very foolish to try to pull this firearm and try to do something stupid that could potentially, cause you to, be in prison, felony, and strip away those rights.
Yeah.
Now, people can argue that if they'd like, but taking it from my perspective when I went to this class and I started uncovering that, man, this isn't something very that I can take lightly. I have to really consider every time I want to conceal this or I want to take this out, or if I even want to pull something out on someone that I feel there's a threat on me, right? Is there a different way for me to avoid this situation, the risk, right? And sometimes, Rohi, we see it a lot in movies. Like, it seems like everybody's watching you like, hey, maybe this is an opportunity for me to use it. But quite frankly, it's the opposite. A lot of the times it's in unfortunate events that do take place that sometimes require you to use it. But for the most part, I think, just being aware of your surroundings. And I think that's what I've learned the most is, do I want to put myself at a nightclub where I know that there could be alcohol, where I know that maybe you don't know this, right? So, it's avoiding risk and just being aware of your surroundings so that you don't have to come to that level of just wanting to use a firearm because you are at the wrong place at the wrong time.
No, and a lot of the gun tubers that are outside of California are already kind of painting that picture. If you're trying to open carry for protection, meaning that you believe it's not just because you're expressing your constitutional right, you want to carry the gun or rifle in the event something happens. They're already arguing. They're already saying, well, I would rather have a concealed carry where they don't know where the guns are going to come from versus having a gun on my hip. And if I'm, a mass shooter or whatever, I'm going to pick the guy that has a gun first and shoot that guy, right?
Yeah.
So it's again going back to the same thing is, do I want to be the target of attention, or do I want to hide in the crowd and be the person that, push comes to shove and I need to use it for self-defense? The person, the bad guy in a sense, doesn't know I have it, doesn't know where it's going to come from. So, and I think that's really good guidance. When we talk about the concealed carry training, a lot of the course that we teach the students is blending in, not appearing to be the person of interest, right? Like if there's a group of us and I say, who has the gun? I don't want somebody to be able to pick that out. I want to be just like, I don't know, I can't figure out who has a gun right now. That's like the ideal mode of protection, right? Not, I have a gun, it's on my hip, it's unloaded, by the way, which means if I need to use it, now there's a whole nother level of execution before I can even get it to a functioning firearm, where concealed carry, it's on me, it's loaded, ready to go. I just have to unholster it, right? So a lot of arguments can be said in that aspect. If it's truly for self-protection, I would rather have a concealed loaded firearm than a visible unloaded firearm that now takes additional steps to even be able to use. So
I think I think someone, if they saw someone with a rifle and said, maybe this is not a good time for me to go try and get an episode of a mass shooting somewhere with all these people. I don't think I'm good. Unless you have something in your head already that you're going to go in there with the purpose of damaging people, but also walking away, right?
But imagine, in using that image I showed you earlier, imagine it's constitutionally protected. You can open carry just like that Black Panthers picture. And now, this coming November, a group of people go with guns and are standing at the polling booths. Because there's a certain sentiment about polling and who can vote and all this kind of stuff. And they say, well, you know what? We're just going to stand here at the line where we can stand with guns.
Yes.
We're not scaring anybody, but we know we're scaring people, right? Like, it's that kind of understanding of, do we want that? Not really. Like, I don't think that's the direction the gun community needs to take it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, allowing it in gun owners to say, like, look, if it comes to be constitutionally protected and you can do it, just, don't make it so that we look bad, like we're here to bully people, or that we're just here to, it's for protection. That's what we want it for. Great.
Yeah, but then again, you would say, well, what's the purpose of law enforcement? Because I think you already see that already in law enforcement. You see that in the public safety officers, where they do carry. They have open carry because that's their job that permits them to do that, right? To make people feel safe when there's events, even in cases where you may have security or armed security that, are required to be at a certain events and or functions. People want to feel safe that if I'm going to attend this function, that there is someone there
Well,
that has some type of
yeah.
training, right?
But it's a door you're opening to. You're opening it to what? The regulated militia aspect, right? To say, like, when you look at the Black Panthers photo and what they're doing, they wanted to get their voice heard, or they're offering some kind of protection. They're an organized group. They have firearms. That's kind of what, unfortunately, and we've argued over that about the whole regulated militia and stuff. It's kind of what you're asking for, right? Like, if we want to have a rally and I'm worried about the other side maybe kind of coming in and attacking us, why not have our group of guys that have guns and form our own security team, and protect that rally?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be law enforcement. So that's where, when you're saying, like, what becomes the purpose of law, that's, again, you're bridging now into, should we be allowed to have these regulated militias, these own groups of armed people that are protecting their own interests, basically?
Yeah, and Roy, and like I said, I'm not one to
didn't
lean
answer
on,
the question,
on any
politician.
certain way, but when you look at history
Yeah.
and these events where you see peaceful protest, and I say peaceful, and there's firearms involved, it's really rare that someone does not spark a simple. I mean, especially when these groups, whether you have the proponents and opponents, are next to each other, protecting their stance,
Yeah.
and not wanting to do something. I mean, there's knuckleheads out there,
Yeah.
Rohit, that just want to say, let's spark this match so that we can start something. You see it
Yeah.
in civil wars. You see it
Sure.
in, I mean, even if you go back to the times where, Nazi Germany, especially in the new, right in the beginning of the stages of where Hitler was trying to gain popularity amongst the Nationalist Socialist Party,
Yeah.
and they were attending these rallies, it was a shootout. There was a
Yeah.
shootout because there was such a tension there in saying we need to overthrow this government because this government is not working for the people. So in many cases, you see that from organized groups that feel like, you know what, I'm going to protest because you are not supporting the rights of the people, and or you're not supporting the people's rights. Therefore, we're going to be armed. And then you have the other opponents saying, well, no, that's not the way it is. And there's some tension. And all it takes is someone to say, well, let's fire. And
Yeah.
before you know it, you may have, again, hypothetically, you may have a mass shooting taking place within two groups that are trying to protect
But
their
it's not
liberties and their
hypothetical.
rights.
I mean, it's only been a couple of years that we had the Rittenhouse issue, case, and it paints the perfect picture of what you're talking about. You have a rights group, which is, Black Lives Matter. They're protesting peacefully for the most part. I mean, we can argue that. But at some point, like you said, knuckleheads in their group now are starting to burn buildings and, cause chaos. And here comes this group that says, hey, look, we have open carry in this particular state. They're going to protest. We have guns on our hips and ARs on us and, fully to the teeth, because, again, they want the checks and balances to say, hey, look, here's our force, because, again, police are kind of tied. Like, they don't want to get, politically involved in it. They're there to pepper spray and whatever if needed. But here's this other side saying, look, hey, we want a stance too. We want you to remain peaceful and stop burning down buildings and businesses and stuff, right? And rioting and looting and all this stuff. And the unfortunate event is, he ends up having to shoot and kill 2 people and injuring a third, because things got out of hand, right? So it's still the argument at the end of the day, was that something that we want to allow to say these 2 groups, they want to be able to exercise their right and protest and whatever, but the armed side of it says, we're just keeping you in check, right? Or do we just say we back off and we wait until the building's already burning, and then now police deciding, well, we don't really want to get involved, or how much involvement is too much, and it just kind of was being acceptable, I hate to say. And that's where that line was being drawn, as these people said it's no longer acceptable to burn buildings down. Like, we're going to take a stance. So it wasn't that long ago,
Yeah,
and
no,
I agree. It's it's do we want to allow that and potentially go back to something where the next whatever is happening, and all of a sudden now there's just this rise up of arms, you know. Like,
Yeah, it's certainly something to be very sensitive about, and I think, you know, hopefully this thing kind of gets unveiled and we'll know. So current enforcement, despite the ruling, officials and legal experts caution that the change is not immediate. The decision typically takes 7 to 21 days to become an effective mandate, and the state of California has signaled it will likely appeal for an en banc review, a hearing by a larger panel of judges, which could further delay any changes to current enforcement. So,
Yeah.
I mean, again, we're not here to provide you any legal guidance,
Yeah.
but again, based on what some of the officials are saying is just caution
yeah.
and allow the time there, 7 to 21 days, to see
Yeah.
if California appeals, and if so, then are there other laws that come across?
Yeah.
I think for us, we just wanted to bring this out to light because some of you may or may not know this is something that just took place here at the New Year, January 2nd. So if you're out in Fresno and you happen to see somebody with a rifle walking down the street, don't be surprised.
Yeah.
I think they're just exercising that right. But again, we would caution you to make sure that you call that county sheriff and find out if there's any restrictions on that.
Yeah.
But with that, I think that'll pretty much wrap this show up here. Rohi, any last words of wisdom you want to add before
No,
we
just
leave?
bask in the glory and just hope that if it does get pushed up, that even with 13 people, it'll still be in our ruling. So
There you go. Well, there you hear it from a gun enthusiast, firearm dealer. And if you ever need anything like that, training, please come see Rohi. I'm telling you, there's not too many classes, especially within the county of Madera, that provide you some really good information and also good training to get you that concealed carry weapon. With that, we'll go ahead and end this. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next week.